So, let us talk as men, as heroes in the world. Come on, guys. All right. We'll wait. Hmm. Why are you so drunk? I don't know. I just am. All right. Here we go. All right, let's go. There. Where the hell is this? Oh my God. Yeah. There is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Here we go. Yes. Go ahead.
Shown repeatedly in scenes of gentle domesticity,
Mhm.
feeding babies. Given that this talk is called The Hidden World of Fatherhood, it's a fair bet that this picture is me with my dad. It isn't. In fact, my dad wasn't involved in my
Mm.
childhood. I was raised by a single mother.
Mhm.
As a young child, I entertained fantasies about my dad riding into my life and giving me all the love I was missing, but he never did. The man holding me in the photograph is my grandmother's brother, my Uncle Alan, or Great Uncle Alan, or Great Great Uncle Alan, because if he's anything at all, he's great, really brilliant. I spent a lot of time with this man, every weekend at least, and he is the most sweet and natural childminder I've ever had the pleasure to know. He'd play with me, board games and shop, which would involve me raiding his ornament case, setting them all out in lines on the carpet, then selling them back to him. He's a keen gardener, so I'd explore in his backyard while he worked. He's always kept cats out there too, who he'd build little houses for. He had 13 out there recently. The neighbours love it, I'm sure. He just can't help but nurture little creatures. He'd take me to the museums and galleries of Liverpool and tell me all about our family and his childhood. And every evening he'd stick on music shows or old films or 70s sitcoms, and I'd fall blissfully asleep in his lap. Then he'd carry me up to bed. They're the warmest memories from my whole childhood. I could never thank him enough. But as girls do, I grew up. And at 19, my partner and I discovered that I was pregnant with our first baby. Darren has given me the gift of two beautiful and amazing children, held my hand as I gave birth to them, provided for us, and still managed to be the most engaged and dynamic and involved father that I ever could have dreamed of for our boys. This man is the most fiercely loving father,
Mm.
kind and indulgent and committed to our boys, and I'm so glad that I'm able to give them what I needed but couldn't have with his love. We've recently separated after nearly 13 years, and it's sad and hard, but valuing each other and each other's roles, we're pursuing equally
Mhm.
shared parenting
Yes.
so our children can
Yes.
continue
Yes.
meaningful
Liz.
relationships with
Mhm.
the both of us. Adrienne Burgess is an old cosmopolitan writer, but with this book, she achieved something really special. It represents a radical reappraisal of the role that fathers have played in their families and that they play today. And it's tender and funny. Reading it, I laughed and cried and thought, my God, I have to get this information out to more people.
It's kind of
So,
like
thank
the
you
Hobson
for being
stream
people.
for hours. I love it.
In Fatherhood Reclaimed,
She's lovely.
Burgess points to the
My good
twilight
friend,
zone of the
by the way.
first half of the
Yeah.
20th century, when separate spheres for men and women became more rigid than they've ever been before or have been since. She writes that the remote figure from the twilight zone has become the stuff of which myths are made. His low-level participation in day-to-day fathering endowed with validity and force which in fact it does not possess. End quote. With the Industrial Revolution, men in particular were increasingly pulled out of the homestead, and by the time World War II ended, two generations of fathers had been absent for extended periods of their children's lives. and moreover often felt unable to share their experiences of war with their families, which may have contributed to the image of a distant father. The response of the state to the problem of men returning from war to no jobs was to propagandize the population with strict gender roles. But many men didn't follow instruction. In fact, the very fact that throughout history, those who've wanted to disrupt the bond between fathers and their families have had to propagandize so very hard is a testament to the fact that fathers instinctively want to be as close and available as possible for their loved ones. The fear, Burgess writes, has not been that men, once they became as close to children as women have routinely been, would find the experience unappealing. Rather, the fear has been that once accustomed to it, they would not willingly give it up. Men have been urged to keep at an emotional and physical distance from infants so that they will be cut off from their most tender feelings, so that they will be alienated from themselves. This has helped condition them to blind obedience, has fitted them to undertake exhausting and degrading physical work, and has prepared them to be in an army in waiting in times of peace, and to kill and be killed in times of war. End quote. Burgess examined the historical record and found a wealth of documentary evidence of warm, loving, devoted fathers. Writing in 1517, Sir Thomas More said this of his daughter: "It is not so strange that I love you with my whole heart, for being a father is not a tie which can be ignored. Nature, in her wisdom, has attached the parent to the child and bound them together with a Herculean knot." End quote. It is likely that at the time of writing, despite our modern misconceptions about history's fathers, More's words would not have struck anyone as surprising. For in illustrations from the 15th century, Saint Joseph is shown repeatedly in scenes of gentle domesticity, feeding baby Jesus and even changing his nappy. As time moved on, however, gradually Joseph's distance grew until by the 18th century there are zero references to his domestic involvement. Similarly, nurturing Earth Father archetypes are found across cultures, with remnants of our own paganistic reverence for the fecundity of men still visible in traditional rituals centered around maypoles and chalk figures engraved into our hills like the Cairn Abbas giant. Cultures that retain the Earth Father archetype as a central character tend to accept more nurturing behavior from men. So it's significant that we've essentially lost him in our civilization. Our fathers are warmest when no one is looking. Researchers have found that when they videotaped mothers and fathers interacting with their children, they noticed that fathers were more reserved. However, after misleading the parents into believing that the camera had stopped rolling, whilst women's behaviour was unchanged, fathers became far more playful and demonstrative. This is Richard with his son Jack. Richard wrote about his experiences as a father, and these are some of his words. On the holding of his son after birth, he said, "It was absolute bliss. I wept profusely and had the biggest lump in my throat I'd ever experienced." Close quote. Richard also wrote, echoing Sir Thomas More centuries before, that "I discovered vulnerability. There was a long, soft, fragile cord extending invisibly from my navel to wherever my son was at any given time. I was constantly and painfully aware of how irrevocably devastated I would be if anything bad were to happen to him. Fatherhood is a mixed bag of gut-wrenching choices, responsibility, vulnerability, and joy, and it's one hell of a transforming epiphany, revealing all manner of things from the past and from within, and illuminating what's truly important. As a mother, I completely empathize with these beautiful words. They confirm for me that the experience of parenthood, bar the physical process of carrying a child and giving birth, really isn't gendered. However, in 2014, Martin Daubney wrote a distressing article for The Telegraph, and I quote, "Running late for a mid-morning meeting the other week, I was passing my 4.5-year-old's primary school, and to my delight, a wall of joyful squeals signaled it was playtime. Realizing I might see my boy Sonny trotting around, I stopped by the school fence and, being tall, peered over to have a look. Sonny started school last September, and my behaviour didn't strike me as anything untoward, but my actions were clearly far from acceptable in the eyes of an angry 20-something bloke at a... Oi, he snarled. What the F are you doing, mate? I'm trying to find my boy, Sonny. He's in reception, I blustered, as others at the bus stop took interest. Oh yeah, lightly tail, the man said. Effing do one. The look on the faces of the other people at the bus stop said it all. Hovering around a school like that, standing on tiptoe to look at kids, it could only mean one thing, surely. I was some kind of pervert. Red-faced and rendered speechless, I hurried away. Minutes later, I became enraged by what had just happened. I'd basically been accused of being some kind of sweet-bag rattling nonce, drooling through the fence with a blacked-out van parked round the corner. It seemingly hadn't occurred to any of those observers that I did simply want to see my own son. Their instinct was to view me as a sex offender. Close quote. He went on, I don't think this is an isolated incident either. Many dads I know think twice before using family changing rooms or viewing areas at swimming pools, before going to playgroups, or even, like me, before waving to their own child through the school fence. Close quote. It's time we valued fathers whose involvement with children is linked to higher educational achievement and occupational mobility and increases a boy's chances of escaping poverty in particular, whose involvement is associated with fewer child behavioural problems, whose involvement is associated with lower criminality in young people, whose involvement is associated with less substance misuse and addiction, whose involvement is associated with higher levels of self-respect and self-regulation, while father absence is associated with earlier sexual activity in teen pregnancy and children with single parents, 92% of whom live without their father, show increased risks of psychiatric disease, suicide, and attempted suicide. I grew up without my dad, and I'm convinced that I've suffered because of it, not just in terms of the heartache I experienced growing up, but also in terms of significant mental health issues that have disrupted my life repeatedly. But growing up without my dad, and then becoming aware of the impact it's had on me, has made me really appreciate the importance of fathers. And there's more good news. This is me with my dad. We finally met when I was 19, just months before I became pregnant with mine and Darren's eldest. We get on well, and he's there for me when I need to chat on the phone or meet up for a beer, and his presence in my life lends me strength. Just after I moved out of my family home, he sent me a card, signed Carl. I thanked him but confirmed that I'd rather he'd signed it Dad. Today, I received a 30-second birthday gift with a note from Dad. It moved me deeply, like a spiritual gap had been filled. So, let's open our eyes and our hearts and acknowledge the critical role that fathers play in the lives of their children. Let's tell our fathers and those who step up to fill father-sized holes like Uncle Alan how much they mean to us. I'm here today, the daughter of a single mother who grew up to become a separated mother, to tell you that there is no greater gift for a child of any age than a meaningful relationship with a loving father.